Curtis and I are so excited for you guys to listen to this week's podcast where we dive deeper on verse 8 in Philippians, something we didn't have time to cover in the sermon. What did you want to preach that you didn't?
What did I want to preach?
So what did you not have time to preach on this week that you thought, hey, this would be good information for our congregation to hear?
Probably verse 8.
Okay.
Verse 8, he says, God is my witness how greatly I long for you all with the affection of Christ. I pulled that whole section out yesterday morning because it was in my sermon. I pulled it out because I thought, for the sake of time, because I knew we had baptism videos, I didn't know they would cut the song. Yeah, I can't get in the services right now. Once that guy hacked my email, I have a problem. So I'm going to have to start a whole new thing to get in there. But I thought, that'll be more time in there than I probably should allot. Because I don't know what time we got out yesterday, but we did get out early.
We got out early, about 56, I think.
Okay. Well, see, if I had put that in there, we'd have been pushing 5 after probably, or something like that. So I just pulled it out completely.
So what was important about it? Why did you?
He's attesting to the sincerity of his prayer for them and his desire for them. So he says, God is my witness. I mean, we hear people say that, and they go, God is my witness. It's like, yeah, maybe. But when Paul says it, he's being serious. It's like, yeah, he's literally saying God himself can testify to this very fact that I have this longing for you guys. So, and he says, first of all, God's my witness. God can attest to the fact that this is true. And he says, I long for you. I have this strong yearning to be with you, this desire. It's not just you want something, but it's got an emotional pull to it. You might yearn whatever you yearn. Boy, I'd like to have that real upgrade on my truck or this, that, or other thing. But this has an emotional pull to it. And so he says, God can testify that I have this strong emotional desire, this emotional pull to be with you guys. And that word witness in Greek is martus. We get martyr from that word, which is funny. One of the definitions of that word has the idea of someone attesting to something and holding to it to the point that they sacrifice for it. And so we call Stephen, or we say from Acts 8, Stephen's the first martyr. He bore witness to something so sincerely and held to that so sincerely that it cost him. It cost him his life. So I was going to talk about that stuff, and then what he said, with all the affection of Christ, affection, tender mercy, compassion, but before he starts his prayer for them, he says, look, God can bear me witness. This is how I feel about you guys. I have a great longing, a sincere longing. I long for you like Jesus longs for you. And how many people can you say that really about, honestly, that you long for them? You want to see them grow and develop like Jesus does. I think we should all have that longing, but I don't know if we all do. And I don't know if I always, I take it back. I know I don't always. In fact, I know I probably mostly don't have that kind of longing.
Well, it's really difficult to have that longing.
Yeah.
There's a selflessness that comes from having that longing. And I think it's really great to bring up where Paul is at currently, too, because I think that's something we didn't talk about.
Yeah, no, he's in jail.
He's in jail, and he has so much joy and a compassion to see them and a prayer for them.
Yep.
And he's in jail.
He's in jail not knowing if he's going to live or die. Because as you go on in chapter 1, he said, I might live, I might not. And in fact, in verse 21, he says, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. But if you start looking, probably at verse 19. He says, for I know that this will turn out for my salvation through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit, according to my earnest expectation and hope that nothing I shall be ashamed, but that with all boldness I will always, now as always, Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. So he doesn't know for sure whether he'll live or not.
Mm-hmm.
But he gets to that point, he said, but for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. So, here's a guy who could be dead at any moment, and he's going, doesn't really matter. All I want to do is honor Christ, whether through my life or my death. But while I'm still alive, I really have a strong desire to see you guys and to see your growth and to see you built up in the faith. And God knows that.
Mm-hmm.
And to say that in his circumstances means a lot. Because, I'd be going, I got a strong desire to see you, but because I'm free, not because I got this great desire to see you built up spiritually, but I just want to get out of here. But he just, he is so committed that life or death for him is to honor God. But while he's still alive, he says to the Philippians, I want to see you. I want to see you grow. And when you read throughout Philippians, you run into like Epaphroditus, who's a Philippian. And he, if I remember correctly, he brought a gift from the Philippians to Paul. And then he got sick, and Paul mentions that in chapter 4, I think it is. But he's got this close relationship with these people. This is not just friendship. This is,
Was Philippians? Was that his first church that he planted, or?
Yeah, that was the first Asian church, not Asian, European church. Remember, 16, he wants to go to Bithynia. He wants to go into Asia.
Yeah.
And he has his vision that night. He says the Spirit stopped him. And then that night he had a vision, and he saw a man from Macedonia saying, come over and help us. So they took that as just what it was, a sign from God to go up to Macedonia, which is Europe, and to preach. And in 16, he goes, and his first convert is a woman named Lydia, a seller of purple. So probably a woman with some, well, not probably, she had some probably influence, but certainly wealth, because purple cloth was, what rich people wore.
Sure.
So she was a businesswoman, and he was one of her first converts, her and her family. And if you remember later on, he gets arrested there and leads the jailer and his family to Christ. Mm-hmm. And so he builds a church through suffering.
Yeah.
It starts with a vision, but it gets built really through his suffering. I'm arrested, beaten, thrown into jail, and God does all the things he does in chapter 16. But yeah, he's got a great love for them, and they got a great love for him.
Yeah, he's definitely got a longing for them. Maybe it's different than what he even sees for other people, because you don't get a whole lot of criticism in Philippians. It's not like what you would see in some of the other letters that he wrote.
Galatians, Corinthians, where he's dealing with problems, even Second Thessalonians. But Philippians, I think I said yesterday, their biggest problem was interpersonal.
Yeah.
And so he deals with that, but even not in a harsh way. He's saying, look at the example of Jesus, follow him. So, he's got deep affection for these folks. But I had that in the sermon, and that was, kind of like I had a little brief introduction, brief background material. And then that would be point 1, which I don't any longer put points up. I don't know if you noticed it or not, but I started putting up points.
You didn't want to get made fun of?
Yeah, I got sick of being harassed about it. So after all these years, I don't put up points anymore. But that would have been in my notes, point 1.
Yeah.
His great longing to see them, and why he wanted. He had the affection of Christ for them, which meant he wanted to see them grow spiritually and grow close to Christ. But like I said, I knew we had baptisms, we had baptism videos. And I thought, well, how much time do we have here? And I knew people are going to be rushing, get out.
For sure.
Get home, get lunch, get things cooked or prepared or whatever for the picnic.
Yeah.
And so it's like, all right, we can pull that out, and that won't kill anything. So
although you don't put points in the sermon anymore, I do appreciate your summaries.
Okay.
Because your summary here was Paul's prayer required, and you had A, B, C, and D. engage with God's word,
Mm-hmm.
pray specifically,
Mm-hmm.
expanding our prayers, and prioritizing spiritual maturity.
Right.
I think all of those are pretty straightforward. What does D mean? Prioritizing spiritual maturity.
When he prayed, you never see him praying, and you know he was concerned. When he talks about Epaphroditus in here, he talked about chapter 2. He talked about how he got sick, and he was near to death. You know he was praying for his for his physical recovery. You
Yeah.
know? And I think he said something like, "God spared me sorrow upon sorrow. It would have grieved him greatly if the guy had died." So you know, obviously, that he prayed for these things. But when he writes to the churches, he's always focusing on their spiritual maturity. You never see him say things like, to the church at Kirksville, greetings, grace and peace to you. And mention, I'm praying that you guys will get over COVID in your area. or at the end of it, when he usually gives like personal greetings and stuff.
Yeah.
You never see him saying like, okay, well, and I shouldn't say never, but it's not often, if ever, that he spends time going, oh, and I know that Fred there is sick, and so I'm praying for his healing. For him, their spiritual growth is the most important thing, and it makes sense from a guy who's in jail, not knowing if he's going to live or die, and saying, whether I live, it doesn't matter. I want to honor Christ in my life, and whether I die. So for him, the spiritual, he did it right there in that first chapter. The spiritual was the most important thing. Not that the physical wasn't, but the spiritual was. And we pray for physical needs for people all the time. We do it on Wednesdays. But for him, even more than that was that their spiritual growth would happen. Maybe that through their physical illnesses or through their financial difficulties or some other struggles,
Yeah.
they grow closer to Christ, learn to trust him more, learn to realize that he's all they need or something like that. So when we pray, we typically focus I shouldn't say mostly, but we often focus on the material. This one's sick. We should pray for that. This one needs a job. This one needs this. We should pray for that. But in the great eternal picture, the spiritual is more important. Because if he dies healthy, rich, and stress-free, and gets to heaven, and, when he gets to heaven, God says, I gave you all these gifts and you didn't use them. Well, ultimately, what did that do? What good was that? So we should focus on, make spiritual issues our priority in prayer. Because God may not choose to heal somebody, but he always wants to grow us in our faith.
Yeah.
Draw us closer to him. Make us like Christ.
That's a challenge.
It is.
Because the physical is what we're currently dealing with.
Yep. And it's the most pressing need, And there are people, you listen to them pray, and it's like, oh, they get it. Because they pray about the physical, but they also incorporate the spiritual in there. That God would use that to draw people to them or draw that person closer to himself. And so they understand that spiritual is important, but the physical, they work together in a sense. But oftentimes with us, we I said us, including me, focus so much on the physical stuff instead of realizing that God may be using this physical for my spiritual well-being.
Whenever your physical circumstances are worse than the person you're praying for, it's easier to pray for their spiritual needs.
Yeah, right.
Paul, in this particular instance, physical needs were way higher than the Philippians' spiritual needs.
Right.
And I think that probably puts it, hey, if I'm able to pray for them, that makes it easier for him to talk about their spiritual needs. Because it's like, who cares if they have a broken bone?
Well,
that's going to heal. What's not going to heal is the relationship with Christ unless they do something.
Right. In chapter 2, verse 4, he says, consider the needs of others above your own, When But each of us look not only to our own interests, but also the interests of others. That's what he's doing. You know, his interest is, from a physical standpoint, I'm in jail. It certainly couldn't have been comfortable because, you know, from everything I've ever read and talked about and seen, he's probably chained to a Roman soldier, you know, in shifts, 8 hours with this guy and then 8 hours with the next guy. And then, you know, so he's got no privacy, you know. Who knows how much comfort he has? Probably not much.
Yeah.
And yet he's not focused on his own interests there. He's focused on the well-being of the Philippians, which is first and most importantly, their spiritual well-being as a church. There's nothing in Philippi that seems to indicate that they had financial issues. You know, some churches you see struggling. And in fact, they sent a gift to Paul.
Yeah.
So they don't seem to be struggling financially, but he's going, your spiritual health is the important thing. And we know they've got two women clashing. And so he's probably thinking their interpersonal conflict will interfere with the health of the church, which will interfere with the witness of the church. And so he's probably praying, you know, understand this about love, the love of God that God has for you and the love that you're supposed to show to each other so that you can eliminate that physical or that interpersonal conflict, which will help the church, which will help the witness of the church in Philippi. So, yeah, it's just, Philippi is that, you know, everybody talks about joy and things like that and being the theme of it. And that may be, I don't know. That's certainly one of the themes for sure. One of them is probably how you think, because he says, let this mind be in you. So I think there's probably multiple themes in Philippians, but joy is certainly one of them. But his interest, you can see it from that first prayer, and you can see it throughout, is your spiritual well-being as a church will affect your witness as a church, which will affect the witness of Christ. You know, it can retard the growth of the church in Philippi, or it could speed up and help spread the growth of the church of Philippi. You know, and Philippi was a Roman colony. It was a big city. Who loves me at this time of the morning? Potential spam. Okay, so no one does. No one does.
I think we're at a pretty good place to stop, actually.